right, welcome everyone to the Miracles course. This is a year-long program. I do a different class every week, we miss about one class a quarter. Any Wednesday that has 5 Wednesdays in it, we skip that week. And this whole process, this whole journey is about not just creating a result, but really enhancing our overall quality of life. That's why we go really deeply into a lot of different areas. Every session is designed so that it feels like a complete experience. And, you don't have to start at the beginning, to pick up wherever you are. Even if you just come every once in a while, you'll get something out of it. You'll get the most out of it if you come every week, because every session builds upon the last. And we set the course content in the context of the 4 seasons, because they make such a lovely template for the whole of human experience. Oh, I forgot to say who I am. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Lynn Woodland. I am the author of a couple of books about miracles. I've been doing this kind of work since, a minister colleague of mine used to introduce me by saying, Lynn's been doing this since before God made dirt. Like, thanks, Michael. But it's true. I've been doing this for about almost 50 years. It's this kind of spiritual, psychological, mind, body, spiritual healing, you name it, kind of mix. And I've written 2 books about miracles because that really became the emphasis of my interest and passion. The first one is called Holding a Butterfly. The second one's called The Breakthrough Point. And they both just, from the moment you start reading them, engage you in an actual miracle experiment that's happening as you read. So you don't have to put the book down before you start seeing things start to happen. So many people who've read the book have shared with me. So anyway, we're now in the spring season. Started at the beginning of March. And this whole season, we're going into the elements of spiritual mastery that truly do enable us to experience a truly heightened quality of life, not just the occasional, wow, cool synchronicity. And this is all working up to some big manifesting that we do in the late spring and summer. Because as we enter these seasons where nature is so producing in very physical ways, flowers, fruit, everything happening, it's all about here using spiritual means, intention, that sort of thing, to bring our dreams and goals into reality. So last month emphasized the creative power of words and thoughts and intentions. But, intentional thoughts without big feelings behind them, it's kind of like an oven that hasn't been turned on. So this week, the focus is all about emotion, because emotion is the energy that gives life to form, that form that's created by our thought. And, if you've ever watched kids have feelings, the younger, the more this is true, they show it with their whole bodies and full volume. If you've ever watched a baby, it's like, their faces will just show, a gazillion emotions in the scope of a minute. It's just very immediate. They don't wait until later or decide if it's appropriate. And watch how little kids are with their bodies sometimes. So what's going on inside of them just really isn't disconnected from what they're showing on the outside, sometimes in ways we might not enjoy. But their feelings are just a spontaneous eruption of energy that flows through and out of their bodies. And just think how different that is from an adult who can just sit totally still, with their hands in their laps, and regardless of whether we're feeling happy or angry or sad, we can just sit there and barely move a facial muscle. I just came from Minnesota, and Minnesotans are known for being stoic. You know, we can just sit there with the same facial expression no matter what we're feeling. But really, emotions are very, very physical in nature. And, you know, each emotion has its own motion and sound connected to it. You know, anger is loud and forceful. And grief is tearful. It's the sound of crying, kind of crumpling over. And joy might be a whoop and a dance and a reaching out, And all the emotions that we feel in this quiet, frozen stillness leave their unexpressed energy in the body, eventually creating an armoring of physical tension, of toxicity, of ultimately numbness of spirit. You know, even unreleased joyful energy can turn toxic. There was one woman in my healing service once, and it was a big group. We were all in a circle. There were a bunch of chairs, and a number of healers were, you know, laying hands on people. And while she was receiving hands-on healing, she just had such a feeling of ecstasy. She wanted to just jump for joy and scream, "Oh God!" You know, just she had this ecstatic burst. And instead, this was in Minnesota. Needless to say, she did the appropriate thing and kept all of her exuberance contained. And, you know, she didn't want to break the quiet, meditative mood, as you don't, you know, since who wants to be that one person? And the consequence of just stifling herself, but she called me up the next day. I knew her fairly well. She had one whole side of her body that she just woke up with it in a painful state of muscle cramping. It was like, and you know, the other thing about holding in and stifling emotional energy and having a backlog of it, it makes it really hard to hear our inner guidance. You know, when emotions flow freely, our desires and impulses are more and more likely to be messages from our inner wisdom, guiding us in the direction we need to go for our highest good in so many ways. And that, you know, instead of being unhealthy responses to a life that's gone out of balance, which is how it feels when we really deny a lot for a long time. We talked about that a bit last week. You know, if we allow ourselves to eat a thing off our diet, we go off, it's like, we might be in for a weekend binge. You know, and so on. The same is true if we become a workaholic. You know, we just crash and just feel like we want to go to the other extreme, or have to because we've manifested some kind of illness. But when we listen, when we really learn to listen, we become more and more aware of the subtle cues we register, often literally as physical body sensations. And we call them gut feelings and hunches. And we did some little exercise around this earlier in the season, where I asked you all to recognize how the feeling of yes feels in your body and how the feeling of no feels in your body. And just start to notice when you're having those, you know, and if you're working on making a decision, just listen to whether your body is feeling more yes or more no. Because these are the kinds of little gut feelings and hunches that often steer us away from unfavorable situations and toward the ones that look like luck, but really aren't so much. They're really things we're learning how to attract into our lives by listening and following. So we need to clear away the toxic backlog and numbness from long-standing patterns of emotional implosion to really be able to achieve more of what I think of as spiritual mastery, not just the occasional spiritual result. And coming out of numbness really requires a more accepting stance toward feeling and emotion than we typically embrace by our culture. Like I said, especially if you're Minnesotan, you'll tend to just sit like that no matter what you're feeling. It's just not done. And, there is this collective tendency to define pain and anger and grief as negative. And because of this, we go to nearly any length not to feel these emotions. I have to say, white culture tends to be a little more like this than other cultures, I have noticed. We white people do tend to be a little more like tamped down. And when we do this, we actually give painful emotions more power to hurt us. If you notice an animal in pain, they'll adjust way more quickly and easily to the experience. An animal will minimize activity as necessary. They'll get on with life as normally as possible. That ancient dog that's dealing with arthritis is still like, so happy to see us when we get home, and we can tell is still experiencing joy in their life and so on. Us humans, we're also likely to torture ourselves with fear of being in pain. We'll start to have thoughts like, will it ever end? Will it get worse? So we're really thinking into a really bad future. And we might feel anger at being in pain. We think, why me, God? Why does this always have to happen? Why does this happen? And we might grieve over being in pain and think, I'm losing so much, so many possibilities because of all this pain. So all of this fear and anger and grief really only intensifies our physical pain. And so many of us have all kinds of fearful beliefs around so-called negative emotions. We might believe anger is unsafe or inappropriate, and we fear it in ourselves and others, like it's just going to come out and hurt somebody or ourselves. We might see sadness as an indication of weakness, or fear that we're going to drown in it if we ever succumb to our feelings of grief. But, if we just learn how to relax into, instead of brace against and overthink our painful feelings, they lose a lot of their power to hurt us. In fact, many experiences that we call pain transform into something else, an intensity of experience rather than a hurt. There's an excellent meditation on pain from his book called Who Dies by Stephen Levine. And I think I've actually done some bits from this meditation here and other lessons where he compares pain to a fist clenched around a burning ember, saying that the harder we tense up physically and emotionally in response to the pain, the more surely it's going to hurt us. Yet as we loosen our grip and just let pain be there and just kind of float freely, it can stop burning. It can even warm us, But before we can open to our feelings in a way that's healing, it's really important to understand the difference between our feelings and our thoughts. While painful thoughts really just tend to increase our pain when we dwell upon them, painful feelings need to be felt and released. to lose their charge. Emotions are pure physical energy and sensation. They're wordless, they're thoughtless. And thoughts are all about words and interpretation. They're our inner dialogue. So, for example, the feeling of anger might be a big knot in our stomach, or our jaw clenching, and our fists wanting to clench. The tension, the urge to scream or beat something, to like, ah! The thought of anger would be our inner conversation about who's to blame, how often this has happened before, the unfairness of life, and so on and so on. We can have those thoughts just go in like a never-ending loop sometimes. And these downward spiraling thoughts really just intensify painful emotions. They keep them wound up tighter and tighter and more and more and more. Now, to release pain, it's necessary to both change the limiting thoughts, as we gave a lot of attention to last month, and open to the feelings. Doing one without the other doesn't really quite facilitate a complete healing. Emotional catharsis without a new thought attached can just lead us more deeply into, despair and rage and depression. If you're a rageaholic, you're not going to be releasing it, because you're aiming it at something, at someone, rather than letting it go. You're really connecting it to all the thoughts that keep you raging. Crying can be the same way, just leading you deeper and deeper into despair and depression, because you're just like, poor me, oh God, I'm so alone, nobody loves me, I'm just going to keep crying, and that doesn't really help. On the other hand, a new thought without the emotional clearing, sometimes that just doesn't take. It's like planting a seed in hard, arid soil. Louise Hay has the end of her You Can Heal Your Life, classic new thought book, one of the very first of its kind, really, from the 80s. And at the end of it, she has all these affirmations. She kind of says what it means if you have this symptom or that symptom or another symptom. And I always suggest to people that you just kind of first listen to your own symptoms and see what they might be telling you and work with them before you just go straight to Louise Hay. Because you can get that insight and maybe think, oh, okay, now I know I'm just going to say this affirmation a million times till my wrist starts hurting. And if it doesn't go deeper than here, the neck down, it can not necessarily take. When we're allowing an emotion its full release, it really turns into something we need. That big anger energy that just wants to scream and push out of us and beat on something. When it's released, it becomes power and passion and physical vitality. It becomes our passion for life, not just our passion to break something. Now, tears of grief really break our hearts open so that we can love again and really deepen our compassion for other people. And then with fear, when we relax into it, it actually becomes exhilaration. It's like, that becomes our courage, our bravery, like our willingness to step out of the comfort zone. So there's just a lot of tremendous energy in emotion. And directed energy becomes power. It becomes our spiritual and our personal power, our personal magnetism, all of that. And of course, the more we suppress emotion, the more we limit our power, our joy, and even our physical health. There actually is a big connection between health and the spontaneous flow of emotion. Long before we manifest a physical illness, there's typically a long-standing practice of suppressing emotion and numbing ourselves to discomfort. And this numbing is often so habitual that we're not even aware of it until that discomfort just, erupts in some extreme form that we just can't ignore any longer. I've just seen numbers of people experience the spontaneous healing of a chronic illness after just a short session of emotional release work, where they gave themselves permission to scream until they couldn't scream anymore, or cry until they had no more tears, and the tears just turned into these uncontrollable belly laughs. I remember one woman who was quite heavy and always, struggling a bit with her weight. And she didn't feel like she'd never done any kind of emotional release work, which I do in my 5-day intensives. If I ever do one of those again, kind of quit when COVID happened. But I've offered that as, part of the all-round tapping into our highest good and mastery and heart's desires. And this one woman felt like, well, I don't really have anything to release. She just, started doing the process. She had a number of people around her supporting her. And she just let out a wail, the loudest scream I have heard. And she just didn't seem to even take a breath for about 45 minutes. I kid you not. She just screamed nonstop for 45 minutes. Everybody was going, yes, you go, girl. And she wrote to me about a year later. It was like a little postcard. The first thing was that she had actually manifested her highest heart's desire, the one that just seemed totally impossible, which was that she really wanted to live in some tropical island, paradise. And she wrote to me to say that it happened, that she was part of a dance troupe. They got invited to some tropical location to just perform and be there. And she wound up moving there. And she said, oh, by the way, after that session, I just started losing weight. I wasn't even trying. It just dropped off of me. I didn't diet, didn't do nothing. And I've lost 100 pounds. So I was going to say, it's powerful. And, there are times when I've done this work with people in group sessions, and emotional energy starts coming out in that form of crying or shouting or even, beating on pillows. And there are people who become really uncomfortable witnessing it, especially anyone who is subjected to, rageaholics and early life abuse in that way. And, it'll just seem terrifying. And then some people will say, well, I did this at a workshop 5 years ago, so I don't need to do this again. and some people say they just don't want to be around it because they'll take in other people's, quote unquote, negativity. Now, the truer reality is that people who don't need to release anything just aren't emotionally affected by other people releasing in their presence. They actually feel compassion and even energized and able to be supportive. Now, when someone else's emotions trigger our own, it doesn't mean that we've taken on their feelings. It's more that those emotions were in us already, and the other person acted as a catalyst to bring them up to the surface into our awareness so that we too had an opportunity to let them go if we, were willing. Because we tend to join with other people at the level of our loudest mutual vibration. For example, unreleased anger tends to be a lot louder than unconditional love. Not more beautiful, just more blaring. Think of it as right outside your window, somebody's car horn went off, and it's going meh, 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 meh. Just as you settled in to listen to this beautiful piece of music, and it was so lovely, and it's getting through even your headphones, it's getting through everything, like, meh. which one is going to get your attention? Typically it's that blaring car horn. All of a sudden we feel like, I'm annoyed. Now, two people who have their metaphorical car horns blaring over their metaphorical symphonies are just going to join at that level of their car horns. And they'll be both magnetized and polarized. They'll really trigger and amplify each other's anger vibrations. And they'll generally, even though they might be attracted at first, or not, sometimes definitely not, they're going to clash at the personality level. And when we really do our own emotional clearing work, we don't attract nearly as much personality clashing into our lives. We become a lot better able to join with the amplifying, or join with, and amplify the higher nature of those around us, which, when we really are vibrating at that level and it's louder than the car horn level, that's when we start to become a catalyst for changing the world around us. We just start to call that out around us. And we bring out the best in people and in society, in the world. I've sometimes heard people describe themselves as being very sponge-like. And personally, I don't like that, that metaphor. I think it can be kind of damaging in that, if you think about it, it assumes and consequently perpetuates a position of powerlessness. A sponge can't help but, soaking up whatever liquid it's encountering. Now, I think it also distorts a truth about our emotional state, so that it's easier to deny responsibility for our emotions. And our words and our interpretations just very powerfully shape our experience. So if you have any beliefs about yourself, that you're a sponge, you say that kind of thing to yourself, oh, I'm too empathic, I just soak up whatever, vibration is around me, you can begin to change that experience of powerlessness by changing your interpretation. And as you give at least as much attention to healing the part of you that magnetizes unpleasant influences, as you give to protecting yourself from them, you're going to see the conditions start to change so that you don't really need protection in the same way. If you feel like you do just, really brought down by other people's, bad vibes, when you're not in their presence, start by just imagining the best for that person, that you are just sending them that the blessings of God are raining down upon your head, and you're just joining empathically, because you are a little empath, right? You're joining empathically with their surprise, their wonder, their relief, their gratitude. You're just joining with that potential that lives within all of us. And that'll help. That'll raise your vibration out of the, sponge that's going to just soak up all the duty around you. To stay in that place. I think, speaking of duty, releasing emotions is a whole lot like releasing accumulating physical waste from our body. It's an ongoing natural process, not a pathological one. It's not one we do every 5 years. Imagine saying, well, I pooped last year, so I don't need to do it again. That was like messy, smelly. I'm not going to do that again. Now, of course, if we hold it in as long as we really can make just pooping into a painful and pathological problem, and we need help with it. But we do it regularly, it just becomes kind of a comfortable, natural release. Okay, I know we all love this poop analogy. Take it just a little bit further. We could choose to see what comes out of our bodies a smelly, disgusting mess, and therefore hold it in as long as possible. Like, oh, I don't have that in me. No, 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 I'm not going there. But we don't do that. I mean, mostly we don't do that unless we're kind of, got some issues. But we don't focus so much on the product of what we illuminate as we do the process of it. And that can be related to emotion. They're very similar. The more we let them build up, the more painful they are to release, the more difficult they are to release, the more spontaneously we let them go, the less focused we become on the product. Like, wow, that was really messy. That was just awful. Like, I'm never going to do that again. So in other words, the tears, the shouts don't have to be a sign of being, quote unquote, messy. It can be kind of natural and leave us feeling better. Now, this doesn't mean losing ourselves on a whole roller coaster of emotional catharsis. Again, this requires separating the physical experience of emotion, and I'll share more about exactly what I mean by that, from the thoughts we usually attach to them. That's a really important step in having and releasing feelings without becoming them. Because, even if you're just into primal scream therapy and all you're doing is screaming, 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 without really changing the thought around what that is, like why you're screaming, why you're pissed, you could just stay in that, wound up screaming anger energy without really releasing it. When most of us have an emotion come up, we immediately start thinking about it. If we're sad, angry, or afraid, we'll dredge up, old messages that affirm that we're alone, that nobody loves us, that we'll never have what we want. Life isn't fair. We're not safe. We're justified in being right, and so on and so on. And, we might dwell on the experiences that wounded us, playing them just over and over. We might even become identified with our wounds, as in, I am a survivor. Look, I survived this. I am still wounded from it, but I survived, and we so become that as a lot of our personal identity. Letting emotions flow freely isn't about dwelling on our pain, and in particular on our victimization. So the next time you feel anger, which could be, mild annoyance, frustration, those are all different names for anger, notice what your conditioned response is. Do you run an angry dialogue in your head? Do you launch a reciprocal attack in either an aggressive or a passive way? As Donald Trump said, is kind of famous for saying, when, he feels attacked, he goes to war, and you'll see him that he is just always in a war. And whether he wins or loses, it's not even the point. I think he's a great model of what happens when we stay in the war. And we can do that in an aggressive way, or we can also do it in a passive aggressive way. We can say, well, all right, then I'm just not talking to you anymore. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. I just don't want you so much anymore, and I'm not going to say a thing about it. Some of us do that. Alternately, some of us might turn anger in on ourselves and just become real down, turn it into depression. Anger is toxic. It's really toxic. There's not much worse we can do to ourselves than to live in a state of anger. It destroys our physical and emotional health. And in the less obvious realm of energy and what we are attracting, anger sends out a vibration that attracts more anger and diminishes our ability to attract love, ease, all kinds of heart's desires, and yes, prosperity. Anger and prosperity, we'll talk more about this in summer, are, they're linked. So if you're wanting to create more prosperity and you've just got a lot of bitter and angry thoughts, cycle through a lot, that's an issue. So as you notice signs of rising anger, experiment with a different response. Like, for example, here's an example probably most people here, maybe not all, can identify with. The occasional moment of road rage when behind the wheel. You know, somebody just really rudely cuts you off, and you want to just mutter to yourself and maybe lean on your horn and maybe a little too long, or maybe reciprocate with some less than safe maneuver of your own. Try instead recognizing you're angry, holding onto the wheel as tightly as you can for a moment, and just letting out a blast of sound from your mouth, not your car horn, like perhaps a big ah, putting your chest and your belly muscles into it. And you can put a lot of energy into the sound without it even needing to be excessively loud. Try growling like you get some release. And instead of aiming this as a death blast at the offending driver, don't want to do that either. That's not good psychic juju. Hold a different intention. Recognize that anger is toxic to you, so you're blasting it out of your body mind. You're blasting it up and out so that it just returns to the universe as pure energy. And when it's not convenient to make noise, maybe you can't do this in, your meeting at work, you can actually get a really good release, surprisingly good, by just quietly clenching all your muscles and just imagining yourself screaming at the top of your lungs. Just everybody try that now. Just close your eyes for a second. Just imagine clenching all your muscles. And imagine that you are just screaming at the top of your lungs. When you can't clench anymore, then just take a deep breath. And just see if you don't feel a little better, like, I got that out of me, whatever that was. And now, when you're involved in an angry exchange with another person, at the earliest opportunity, take yourself away from the interaction, and you might try blowing off some steam this way. It might not change everything between you, but it will help you come back to the situation with a cooler head and an ability to be more effective in communicating, because you're not projecting everything your mommy and daddy did that, this reminds you of, you're a little bit more in, okay, here and now, this is the reality, this is what I need to do. You can just think a little more clearly. There's similar steps you can take around the whole experience of grief. I mean, for starters, just make friends with your tears, because they literally carry toxins out of our body. So do let them flow. Don't, much as possible, don't stifle them, but do change any downward spiraling inner dialogue that may accompany tears and sad feelings. So instead of telling yourself that like it's hopeless, you're alone, you'll never be happy, or that you're weak, whatever you tell yourself, imagine I'm letting these tears come out now. I'm emptying all the sadness from my body so that I am really, raining on the earth, preparing for new growth. This is my way of opening to something new and fresh and wonderful. And, the other thing about tears is they actually are way more healing when they're shed in the presence of compassionate others whom you trust. So if you tend to cry alone, find ways to share your tears with people you trust, some beloved family member or friend or a therapist or your support group. Grief experience alone is a little more likely to sink us deeper into isolated despair. And grief shared with others is more likely to turn into love, because we're crying and suddenly we're just receiving all this loving compassion from people around us. So we empty out and then we get filled. It's a really different experience. And there's also something about sharing vulnerability with other people, especially if you don't do this very often, that there's something very connecting, that people just see something new and different in you and just are magnetized to it, just flow to it in love. So give yourself a little more permission to cry when you feel the urge. And, if you do this more, you might find yourself tearing up more often, even as you feel less sad, because when you empty out all the tears of grief, you'll discover tears of joy, of love, and of compassion. And rather than being an unacceptable sign of weakness and vulnerability, they can really demonstrate the strength of our love. I know I've seen that happen to myself more and more and more, that when something feels real and from the heart, I'll often just get a little teary. It's like, oh, tearing up. This must be something real. And it's not about being sad. It's about being really deeply touched. So start inviting your feelings to come to the surface by simply paying attention to your body. Sit quietly from time to time. Notice what sensations you're aware of in your body. Is there tightness anywhere, or pain, or hollow, empty feeling, or a surging feeling of energy? Just give attention to whatever is there and just let it be. Now, our meditation this week is too long for me to include it in tonight. So I do hope you'll go to the website and do it, because it's guiding you into really checking in with your body, remembering when you last felt angry and noticing, well, what does that feel like in my body? And it just goes through all the 4 primary emotions so that you're a little more able to recognize them. And I think it'd be really important to do that. And, when you notice yourself having a feeling, just also see, how does your body want to move or position itself? Do you want to clench up or push or run or collapse or curl up or stretch? Like I said, all the different emotions have a different kind of, motion to them typically. And experiment with, when you're in a safe, appropriate setting, with allowing your body permission to express a little bit more of that. Now, of course, if your emotions just seem so deep and dark, if they've inhibited your ability to perform normal activities of your day, if you're having any suicidal or violent thoughts, then it's important to find outside help to assist you with this work. Find a therapist or an appropriate support group. And sometimes don't be afraid to reach out for help, because sometimes the reaching out is just the act needed to just break through a downward spiral of unhappiness. In fact, that's really part of the AA Bible, that, some of what creates addiction is our stubborn self-sufficiency that believes we have to do it all ourselves. We can't. And the reaching out for help, it really starts the process. And, of course, I do believe that therapy and medications are very helpful and indicated at times. And at the same time, a lot of what we seek professional help for can be addressed with like-minded others, people we trust, just letting ourselves cry, letting ourselves have emotion. So this week, among the other exercises is to play with your feelings, play with the intention of becoming more aware of them in general, and specifically see where you may have resistance to emotion. Most of us have an emotional range, with some emotions falling in our comfort range and some definitely falling out of our comfort zone. Give attention to the 4 primary emotions, which are anger, sadness, fear, and joy. anger, sadness, fear, and joy. And, there are a lot of subtle shadings of emotions, but I have this emotion, it's none of those. But if you look deeply enough, you'll find these primaries there, some combination of them, in the same way all shades of color break down into, just three primary colors. For example, frustration is a name for low-level anger. Confusion can be a response to fear. It could be an avoidance of anger or some other emotion. It's usually kind of a muddle of emotion. Depression invariably, typically masks the anger we turn inward. Might have some sadness mixed in with it too. So see if you can identify moments of feeling all four of the primary emotions every day. And also notice, see if you can identify which of those four is, you just don't want to go there. You've been trained to have that outside of your comfort zone range. And we do typically receive a lot of training on the path of becoming adults. So see, which one, women get trained a certain way, men get trained a certain way, different cultures get trained certain ways. So there's a lot of outside pressure to show some and not others. See if you can tune in rather than zone out to moments of low-level emotion we experience all day long. The seconds of annoyance while driving would fall into the anger category. Just a moment of melancholy as you reflect on the past might fall under the sadness heading. Thinking about an upcoming meeting, that you have a little stress around might inspire a moment of fear. See if you can just be on the lookout for emotions the way bird watchers stalk birds. Keep a log, keep your journal like, oh, I saw anger today. Oh, I saw a little sadness. Woohoo, I saw some fear. See if you can notice all four feelings in every day. And when you've noticed one, pay attention to your body and just observe everything you can about the physical body sensations that accompany this emotion and just relax into them. If you have that teary feeling, let yourself kind of curl up and make it bigger. It's like all about that, like kind of making it a little bigger. Now, again, emotions are very physical. You don't have to feel them even to release them. And this is important to understand. You don't even have to start out by feeling emotion in order to release it. You can start by just doing the physical action, and eventually that's going to take you into the feeling. So, there is some value to acting as if. If you just start laughing exuberantly, belly laughs, just pretend you're an actor and you're acting, you're just really doing laughter, not like, ha, 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 that kind of laughter. You start to feel that same life force and exuberance that goes along with laughter. If you get on your bed and start beating on your pillow with all your might and screaming at the top of your lungs, sooner or later, you're going to feel the emotion of anger. And if you want to experiment with this, try just screaming no over and over while you beat on a pillow. Or if you're in a sound-controlled environment, hope I didn't do this. Just do this. Try doing that. In fact, everybody now, if you've got a pillow handy, get your pillow, you can mute yourself, and start stomping your feet and just go, no! And you don't have to feel, pissed off at your mother or your, next door neighbor or whoever. You can just do that. It can be kind of fun. And when you come back, just notice how your body feels. Kelly is powerful. Yeah, it really shifts energy. And you can Not like the idea, oh, I don't want to do this kind of damn psychotherapy, but just try the physical, like, and see if it doesn't make your body just start to tingle and relax and feel alive, and maybe the way it wasn't a few seconds before. And you might want to see if you can find a way to do the physical action of each emotion this week. You can do it in the privacy of your own little bedroom with nobody watching. You don't have to do it in the boardroom or anything. Dance for joy, unless it's really appropriate. A shamanic healer once taught me this really simple exercise. He said, just let out a big stream of ha-ha-ha-has, putting your belly muscles into it, and first let your voice get higher. And see how this makes your body just want to expand and become the sound and feeling of laughter. Then do the same again, this time letting your voice go lower and lower into and see how you just, almost naturally start to crumple into the sound and feeling of crying. And as I described in your new road rage exercise, one big martial arts type blast of, can access some big power energy and release some anger energy. Always do this safely, especially working with the energy of anger. You need to be careful, make sure anything you choose to beat on is soft. It's, you're not going to hurt yourself, and sturdy enough not to get destroyed by the process. As I said, screaming into a pillow is a great sound muffler. And if big energy is difficult for you, just try like we did, just stomping your feet. And again, do it on a rug rather than on cement, because if we really do get into releasing, we can stop feeling, anything. We're just like into the energy. So, be careful, give it care. But, allow yourself to stretch a little bit. A lot of us, I would say many of us, if not most of us, have a lot of resistance to making loud noise or doing a big physical action, unless we're on the dance floor and we're really comfortable in our bodies, so we just, let go. We can have a lot of, resistance, and even hearing someone yell can feel dangerous. I know that was me. I started working for a very transpersonally oriented mental health center when I was only 20 years old. I didn't know anything. I don't know why they hired me and paid me. I did not know anything. I really did a lot of learning on that job and worked with some very skilled therapists who did a lot of work with psychodrama and experiential therapies. And one of the things we had was this big thunder wall, we called it, which was just this big metal sheet. And the psychodramatist would get people to throw a pillow at it while they were just screaming out something or another. And it would just make this incredible sound, and people would be yelling. And sometimes there would be a chorus of other people yelling with them. And I would just be in horror. I'd be petrified because, I grew up with two screaming parents. I just learned to shut the hell up and keep my mouth shut and be quiet. I would get hurt if I, screamed back. It was just terrifying. And it really felt like something like a weapon just aiming at me, all that screaming. And what I eventually learned, it was really great experience, therapy on the job, let me tell you, is that once I let go enough to be able to join it, to scream with the screamer, to make noise along with, then it was kind of like a big wave. You know how anyone who's ever stood in the ocean and there are waves coming at you, and there's undertow, and you just kind of brace against it, you can easily just get bombarded and toppled, and it just feels like this assault. However, if you learn to just rise with it, it's like, woo, exhilarating, and there, it takes you with it, and it's just really kind of this fluid exhilaration. And that's kind of how this kind of work is. So again, press, gently at the limits of your comfort zone, but don't do anything that you think could possibly harm you. So as I was saying, exercise, a number next is through all your attention to your emotions. See if you can identify the emotion most out of your comfort zone and range of expression. If you're one of those people who never talk louder than this, you have this very soft, sweet voice that everyone loves. You never talk loud. People can't really hear you in meetings. Just, start screaming in your car. Do something, like let some volume come out, because even if you have, throat issues, like thyroid issues or throat issues of one sort or another, or neck pain, it'll help really loosen up this whole chakra and also energetically loosen up your ability to speak your words and have them truly heard. There's a lot of impact that this kind of release has. I could go on and on, but I see we're just getting a little past 9. So another thing that I'm not going to get into, but it's in the materials, is what is not emotional release. All the great things we do, but they're not the same as emotional release. There's a whole list of them. So do check that out too. Like, when is it time to stop sharing your story? When is it important just to share it out loud? When's it time to just stop sharing it? Those kinds of things, just a lot of those. Every week, I'm in an hour early, I do a healing. Half an hour early, I do intuitive readings for anyone who wants one. So until next time, everyone, I love you guys.
Thank you so much.
I love and bless you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Namaste.